Today I'm going to show you how to make this beautiful loaf of Farmhouse White Bread using your bread machine dough cycle. My Farmhouse White Bread is by far and away my most popular recipe on my channel, so I've adapted the recipe and now you can use your bread machine to make this beautiful loaf of bread. You can throw in all the ingredients and let your bread machine make it start to finish, or like we're going to do today, you can use the bread machine dough cycle and then shape it and throw it in the oven to bake. Let's get started. To get started on our Farmhouse White Bread, we're going to start with 1 cup of warm water. You want this to be about 105 to 110 degrees, and this will just help our yeast to activate. Our next ingredient is white sugar. We want 1/3 cup of white sugar. Just pour that right in there with your water. Next, we want our yeast. This is my Red Star Active Dry yeast that I use all the time, but you can also use instant yeast or bread machine yeast or rapid rise. Anything like that will work just fine in this recipe. We are going to use 2 teaspoons of active dry yeast, or if you use the little packets, you can use just 1 packet. Just use the whole thing. That'll work just fine. I keep my yeast in the freezer all the time, and I pull it out right in time to make bread. I don't let it come to room temperature or anything like that. It's just ready to go, and it'll stay good forever like that. Our next ingredient is oil. I'm going to use some olive oil. You can use whatever kind of oil you want. Coconut oil works really good in this recipe, or you can use butter instead. But I'm going to use 2 tablespoons of this olive oil. If you're going to use butter, use 2 tablespoons of melted butter. But it's good to know that if you use oil instead of butter, your bread is going to be a little bit more moist. So oil is good for breads. Our next ingredient is our flour. We're going to use 3½ cups of flour. I'm using bread flour. You can also use all-purpose flour in this bread. The difference between bread flour and all-purpose flour is that the bread flour has a higher protein content. So as your bread kneads, it'll develop the gluten better, so you'll get a higher risen loaf of bread and a little bit different texture and chew if you use bread flour, but all-purpose flour is just fine. Our next ingredient is salt. We're going to want 1 teaspoon of salt. You can use any kind of salt you want. I've been using this Redmond's Real Ancient Fine Sea Salt, and I really like it. It's really cool. Hopefully you can see the color. It's this pretty pink color. It's kind of like the Himalayan pink salt, but this salt is from North America, so that's kind of cool. So 1 teaspoon of salt. Now that I have all the ingredients in the bread pan, I'm going to throw this into my Zojirushi bread machine and choose the dough cycle. I've used a lot of bread machines over the years, and all of them have had a dough cycle. So you should have a dough cycle on your bread machine. So you might have to scroll through and look for it. But choose the dough cycle and press start. Now the dough cycle is going to mix up the ingredients, knead them, and let the dough rise. It takes a lot of work out of bread making. Now that the bread machine's been going just for about 4 minutes, I like to check on my ball of dough. I like to make sure there's no flour or any ingredients stuck to the sides of the bowl. Go ahead and take a rubber spatula and kind of let everything get off the sides. Really important at this point to check your ball of dough. Make sure it's not too sticky. Make sure it's not sticking to the sides and the bottom too much. If it is, add maybe 1/8 cup of flour. And if it's too dry, add maybe a tablespoon of water. Now that I let this knead for a few more minutes, it's looking nice and smooth, and that is exactly what you want your ball of dough to look like. Now I'm going to shut the door and let the bread machine do all the work. It has been 1.5 hours and the dough cycle is complete. Look at that dough. Look how well it rose. That is looking perfect. That is what you want your dough to look like at the end of the dough cycle. Now I'm going to put this dough aside and prepare my bread pan. I'm going to bake this Farmhouse White Bread in my cast iron bread pan. I love these bread pans. Every time I use them, I like to oil them up before I put my dough in. I'm going to add maybe a tablespoon or 2 of this olive oil. And then I just like to take a paper towel or a brush or anything you have and just rub it all over the insides of your bread pan, no matter what kind you're using. I think this works way better than spraying. And this will just make sure that your loaf slides out really nicely. So just rub that around your bread pan really well and prepare it for your bread dough to go inside. This dough looks so beautiful risen like this, but now it's time to punch it down. So you're literally going to punch this dough down and then turn it out onto your counter. Make sure your countertop is nice and clean. Just turn it out from your bread pan and put it on the counter. Now it is time to shape into a loaf. Begin by pressing it out into a rectangular shape. Now I like to do the head down, shoulders in method of shaping a loaf of bread. So I pull the head down and press it out with the palms of my hand, pull in the shoulders or the sides and press it out again with the palms of my hand, and then continue to roll it into a nice tight log. This will give us really good surface tension for our dough, and so the dough will be shaped really nicely as it rises and as it bakes in the oven. After you have it rolled up, pinch the seams on the sides and on the bottom together, just to keep your loaf together really nicely. Roll it around, pat it out, try to get it nice and even. You can be rough with it, you can kind of smack it around and get it the shape that you want. And now it's looking really good. So grab your loaf pan. You can see that it's all oiled up really nicely. Now just throw your dough into the loaf pan. Now that it's into the loaf pan, I'm going to just let this sit on my counter and rise for about 30 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and get my oven preheating to 350 degrees. I'm just going to let this sit here on my counter just like that. I'm not going to cover it or do anything like that. My dough has been rising for 30 minutes and look how well it's risen. It looks fantastic. This dough is ready to go into the oven. So I'm going to pop this into the oven and let it bake for 30 minutes. I just pulled our beautiful loaf of Farmhouse White Bread out of the oven. Look how gorgeous it is. It rose so well. It's a beautiful golden brown color. Oh, this looks great. I let this bake in the oven at 350 degrees for 30 minutes. So it's piping hot. I just got it out. It smells so good. So this is what I like to do. I like to turn it out of the bread pan immediately after getting it out of the oven. So let's see how well it comes out. Oh yes, it just slid right out, and that's because we oiled up our cast iron so well. That is why I love my cast iron bread pans. The bread slides out and bakes and everything's so much better than anything else I've used. Okay, here it is. What do you think? Isn't it gorgeous? It looks so good. It is soft and fluffy. Oh, okay, this is what I like to do. Once I get it out of the bread pan, I like to take a pat of butter and just spread it all over the bread. This will give you a really nice soft crust. I don't like to use cooling racks. I like to use tea towels. So I like to take a tea towel and just wrap my bread in it. Now ideally, you would let this totally cool completely 100% before you cut it. What I like to do is I like to just leave it on the counter wrapped up in this tea towel, and that warmth and the moisture kind of gives you an even softer, better crust. I like that. I don't like crunchy crust. So that's how I do it. If you do like crunchy crust, go ahead and use like a cooling rack or something like that. But today I'm gonna go ahead and just cut right into it because we need to see this bread. This bread is really great for sandwiches, it's really great for snacking, it's really great for toasting. I mean, it just is great for everything. This is a good classic recipe. There it is. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, it's soft, it's squishy, it looks great. Oh, it's so soft. Oh, this bread is amazing. I just ripped it a little bit because it's so warm, but here it is. It's gonna be so good. You put a little bit of butter and honey or some preserves on top. Oh, you're gonna be eating good. I'm just gonna take a little bite to test it. This bread is just phenomenal. The texture is amazing. The taste is just out of this world. Truthfully, this is my favorite bread recipe of all time. I could make this and eat this, only this bread for the rest of my life and be perfectly content and happy about it because this is so good. Now you can make it the way that we did today using the dough cycle, or you can put in all those same ingredients and let the bread machine totally make it for you. Try it out that way too and see which way you like better. I like it better using the dough cycle. I will also put the link to my original recipe that I use in my stand mixer. That way is great too. That'll make you 2 loaves of bread. I will put the recipe down in the description so that you can make it, try it out, and come back and let me know how you like it because I know you're gonna love this bread. Thanks for being here with me on Robyn on the Farm. I will see you next time. Once the loaf cooled completely, I put it in this bread bag to keep nice and fresh.
Robyn's in the kitchen, dough beneath her hands, wheat from the fields and eggs from her land. Sunlight through the window, a warm golden glow. She's working hard to make that dough.